If you like my content, you can go to my YouTube page and click the join button. And for as little as 99 cents a month, you can become a member. If you're a member, you get access to beautiful little emojis on live stream. And you will also get a little gesture hat next to your name. You can also support me on Patreon for only $5 a month, uh, which would be very helpful. It's helping me upgrade my equipment and such. All right. And on that note, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be watching some PragerU videos. I'm going to be reacting to them. PragerU is pretty horrifying. It's basically propaganda. I've only heard negative things about it. I've only ever seen one PragerU video, however, so this will be an interesting experience. I will try my best to give commentary to these videos. The first video we're looking at here is called A Short History of Slavery, and it's 5 minutes long. So let's take a look and see what happens. All right, folks, let's begin.
And now for a brief history.
Okay, already we have Candace Owens. That kind of discredits it to begin with, doesn't it? And by the way, let's not let's not hide the fact that choosing a black woman to do this video is kind of gross. Um, so anyway, let's continue with that.
Of slavery. Here's the first thing you need to know. Slavery was not invented by white people.
Um, did anyone ever say that? I've never heard a person say that slavery was invented by white people. It kind of seems like there might be a bias. Call me crazy. I feel like there might be a bit of a bias here. I'm trying to, some sort of commentary. Okay.
Did not start in 1619 when the first slaves came to Jamestown. It existed before then. It did not start in 1492 when Columbus discovered the New World. In fact,
I'm sorry. Who's claiming that? Who is claiming that that's when slavery started? Okay.
When the intrepid explorer landed in the Bahamas, the native Taino tribe hoped that he would help them defeat their aggressive neighbor.
Nope. Nope. I'll be reacting to a Columbus video next. So I won't go too much into that. The point here is that's not true. Maybe they did a bit, but that was not the first thing that happened when he met the Taino. And that's kind of gross. Yeah. You know what? Okay, so let's just continue.
The Caribs. The Caribs enslaved the Taino, and on occasion...
That's funny. You know the other person who enslaved the Taino? Columbus. Also, there's we don't have much evidence that the Caribs actually did practice cannibalism. That may have been a European invention. So there's that issue too.
Served them for dinner. Slavery existed in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The word slave act.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of weird. It basically existed everywhere. I don't know why she limited it to those places. It absolutely did exist in those places. It also existed in Europe. It existed in South America. It existed everywhere. But she seems to be trying to make a point by only talking about, places where there are non-white people. Anyway, okay, so here we go.
Actually comes from the Slavs of Eastern Europe. Millions.
Oh my God. See, this is going to take forever. This is a lot. Okay, first of all, that is a myth. The historical evidence on this is scant. We don't know that that's where the word slave came from. We don't know if it came from the Slavs, maybe, but that is a historical debate. And obviously, she has a commentary here. She's trying to equate slavery with white people being enslaved. Okay, but that's not true. That's debated.
Of them, all white, by the way, were captured and enslaved by Muslims in the 9th century and later by the Ottoman Turks.
Okay, there is some truth to that, in that the Islamic empires did, in fact, use slavery. So did the Europeans. So did the Romans. It's interesting. She only mentions the Ottomans. I wonder why. Why do we think she wants to emphasize what the Muslims were doing and ignore what Europeans were doing?
Slavery existed when the Roman Empire controlled the Mediterranean and most of Europe from the 1st through the 5th centuries. Slavery existed when Alexander the Great conquered Persia in the 4th century.
Notice, though, she's not saying who did the enslaving. She said that slavery existed when the Roman Empire was around. She is not saying that it was the Romans doing the enslaving. Same thing with Alexander the Great. She does not saying that it was Alexander the Great or the white Greeks who did that. Okay, she's just saying it existed.
BC. It was so common that Aristotle simply considered it natural. The slave master model was just how the world operated in the great philosopher's day. Slavery existed during the time of the ancient Egyptians 5,000 years ago. As
Oh,
far back as we can go in human history, we find slavery.
yeah.
As renowned historian John Steele Gordon notes from time immemorial, slaves were a major item of commerce.
Yep.
As much as a third of the population of the ancient world was enslaved.
Yep.
Here's the second thing you need to know. White people were the first to formally put an end to slavery.
Okay. Uh, mm, I don't even know what to say about that. This is bad framing. There were various liberation movements for slaves. The point here is that the framing, we all see what she's trying to go with, right? She's trying to make it, she's trying to defend, for some reason, white people. Okay. So there are other times in history where slaves have been freed that by non-white people. Um, so it's not true, but the framing here, I think we can all see where she's going with this.
In 1833, Britain was the first country in the history of the world to pass a Slavery Abolition Act. They were quickly followed by France, who in 1848
Okay.
abolished slavery in her many colonies. Then, of course,
Mhm.
came the 13th Amendment in the United States Constitution. After
Which, okay, the 13th Amendment did end chattel slavery. However, if you read it, folks, it says at the end of the 13th Amendment that slavery is illegal except as punishment for a crime. So it did not completely outlaw slavery. It allowed slavery in prisons, which is where you get the idea of chain gangs. And by the way, this prompted especially southern states, to do everything they could to criminalize blackness so that they could put as many black Americans in prison as possible and continue using them as slaves. So it is an oversimplification to say that slavery completely ended because of the 13th Amendment. It absolutely did end mass chattel slavery, but again, oversimplification there by all accounts.
centuries of human slavery, white men led the world in putting an end to
Oh, it's so gross, all this weird talk of white men and stuff.
the abhorrent practice. That includes the 300,000 Union soldiers, overwhelmingly white, who died
Why does she have to emphasize that they were overwhelmingly white? There were also black soldiers who fought extremely bravely, and as a matter of fact, I don't wanna say they fought harder than the white soldiers, but they had something that they were actually fighting like, they were really fighting for liberation and things like that. I don't know what anyway.
during the Civil War. Now, am I saying that this makes white people better than anyone else? Of course not. My purpose here is to simply tell the truth, and the truth is that human history is complicated. No one, regardless of skin color, stands guiltless. Yet today,
Again, okay, so yeah, that's technically true. I will say the type of slavery that was done in the New World was pretty unique because it was not, for example, there was slavery going on in Africa, but it was typically for a limited amount of time, and you'd be freed later. Chattel slavery was specifically ended up becoming specifically racial. And you would, if your mother was a slave, you would be born into slavery. That was not something that was, as common around the world, so it almost was more brutal in a lot of ways. Obviously, I'm kind of splitting hairs here, no slavery is good, but yeah.
we are never told to consider the murderous Persian Empire or the cannibalism of indigenous tribes of North and South America or the heinous
Okay, yeah, obviously she's talking about all these brown people that she is now trying to demonize, talking about the Persians, the Romans, by the way, extremely brutal people. The word decimation, which is a word in English we typically use when we're talking about mass destruction, actually comes from Latin, and it was when Romans would line up every male in a town and kill every 10th male in order to bring that town to obedience if they weren't obedient to Rome. So, I mean, again. All ancient empires were pretty brutal. Most empires are very brutal. It doesn't matter what the skin color of those people were. So to handpick the people in North and South America and the Persians seems like a deliberate choice. Okay.
Actions under the imperialistic Muslim, Chinese, Mongol, or Japanese empires, to name just a few. Instead, we're told that slavery is a white phenomenon.
I've never heard that. I've never heard anyone say that slavery is a white phenomenon ever. Never once. And I've been a teacher for years.
And like all persistent lies, this lie spawns a bunch of other lies. On social media, I come across extraordinary depictions about how Africans lived like pharaohs before Europeans came and laid waste to their paradise.
So there's actually some truth to that. Not definitely not all places in Africa, but there were actually black pharaohs. There were the Egyptians had an interesting idea of race. Like they didn't really care what your skin color was, as long as you wore makeup and had a certain style, you could be Egyptian. So yeah, there were vast kingdoms and civilizations in Africa where Africans did in fact live in quite abundance in luxury and such. Not everywhere, but yeah.
I wish any of this were true, but it's not. It's a fantasy. The
Nope.
truth
Not a
is that
fantasy.
Africans were sold into slavery by other black Africans, and in many cases, sold for items as trivial as gin and mirrors. Whites didn't go into
So, okay, there's multiple problems with this. There is some truth to that. There was slavery going on in West Africa, and I will say though, the incentive for different groups in Africa to enslave each other was the fact that they could then sell those enslaved people to Europeans. So, without that incentive, there would not nearly have been as much enslaving going on in West Africa. Um, so that's just nonsense, okay? Also, a lot of the leaders of these groups in Africa that were doing trade with the Europeans, it partially protected their own hides because if they were to hand over slaves to the Europeans typically wouldn't go after them then to take them as slaves, if that makes sense. Um, so that again, massive oversimplification. Also, the slavery that was going on in West Africa was not for life, and it was not inheritable. So you wouldn't like pass it on to your child, like was what would happen in the New World. Um, okay.
the interior and round up the natives. They waited on the coast for their black partners to bring them black bodies. The stark reality is that our lives had very little value to our ancestors. Here's the third thing
It's
you need
gross.
to know. If you think slavery is a relic of the past, you're wrong. There are some 700,000 slaves in Africa today, right now. That's
But folks, there are slaves in America today. Sex trafficking is a form of slavery. I mean, there's slaves all over the place. It's one of the biggest global industries is the human trafficking. I don't know. Interesting that she is talking specifically about Africa. I wonder why that might be.
the lowest estimate that I could find. Other sources say there are many more. For context, that's almost twice as many slaves as were ever brought to the United
Okay, I'm sorry. That is funny. So Africa, I can't believe I have to explain this to Candace Owens. I mean, yes, I can. Africa is a continent. It is a massive continent. So to compare the number of slaves on a continent with the number of slaves in one country, the United States, is an asinine comparison to begin with. Um,
States. Child soldiers, human trafficking, forced labor. These are the conditions that currently
oh, this is
exist
gross.
within the same sub Saharan region where the transatlantic slave trade originated.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that too is the slave trade deeply damaged African societies. Like deeply damaged African societies. It almost did permanent damage with the demographic changes and things like that. A lot of the issues in Africa today can be traced back to the slave trade and the violence it caused, and did cause mass violence. The slave trade led directly and indirectly to millions of people dying in Africa because of wars over slave trading, because of the demographics, the decrease in demographics of people being taken out of Africa. So maybe she should mention that that the white people who were doing the slave trading are part of the reason why there's still a lot of those issues in Africa today.
African bodies are being sold today like they were sold then. And no, they are not being purchased by any country of white men. In fact, slavery by any
Uh, no. Yes, they are. The slavery that still goes on, which is illegal, sex trafficking and stuff, is definitely still being purchased by white men. Jeffrey Epstein, okay. Anyway,
traditional definition is exclusively practiced today within non-white countries.
this is so gross. Nope, not true. Nope, not true at all. Just racism. She's just doing a racist dog whistle here.
But we hear almost nothing about that. Just like we hear nothing about how slavery was universal until good people in Europe and America ended it 2 centuries ago. Why? Because our so-called leaders, black and white, wouldn't profit from it. Black victimhood is nothing if not profitable. It allows
Oh, is that the case? Is that the case? I'm going to a black community and ask them if they feel their position of being victims has been profitable for them. Um, Black Americans have less wealth than white Americans. Um, Tons of other stats show that because of the history of slavery and oppression of the black community, they have been economically disadvantaged. That is just a gross lie. Okay.
politicians and funds racial grievance groups. And if black Americans began to view themselves as partners in the American dream, if we embraced the patriotic spirit that holds all men are created equal, the patriotic spirit that is our real heritage, then the race hustlers would soon be out of business.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. The irony there. She's accusing other people of being race hustlers. Um, what is she doing right now? Uh, does she have any sense of like self? What's the term? Does she like? Can she not see what she's doing? Okay.
Who wants that? I'm Candace Owens, author of Blackout for Prager University.